April 24, 2008. Barnhurst, Southeast London. A father enters a terrace house on Parkside Avenue and walks upstairs toward his son's bedroom. The home is quiet. Nothing outside suggests that one of the most brutal domestic murders recently investigated in the area has taken place behind the front door. Inside the bedroom, 41-year-old Graham Boyne is lying on the bed. He is naked apart from a pair of white socks. His body is covered in blood. A post-mortem examination will reveal that Graham has been stabbed 31 times. The attack is so sustained that police immediately begin looking for someone with a powerful personal reason to keep striking long after a single wound could have ended the confrontation. There is no sign that Graham was killed during a random street robbery. He was attacked in the place where he should have been safest, and the circumstances suggest that he had allowed his killer to come close without expecting danger. Then detectives learn that his marriage is collapsing. His estranged wife, Maria Boyne, has repeatedly spoken about wanting the family home. She is pregnant by a younger lover. Divorce is approaching, and the £170,000 house is the couple's only major asset. Within hours of Graham's death, Maria removes a blood-stained gold chain from his neck, pawns it for £220, and uses the money to spend the night with her lover. But the most important part of her plan is still ahead. Maria begins telling police that the young man carrying her unborn child is the person they should investigate. The case will become a battle between two lovers accusing each other of murder. One will tell the jury that Maria confessed. Maria will insist that he was the killer. Only one of them will be convicted. Before we reconstruct how investigators separated the lies from the evidence, subscribe to the channel. Every case here is rebuilt from court reporting, police findings, witness testimony, and verified records rather than rumors or fictional details. If you value complete true crime investigations, subscribe now so you do not miss the next case. Now let us return to Parkside Avenue, because the condition in which Graham was found gave detectives their first clue about how the killer may have reached him. Graham Boyne worked as a television repairman and engineer. He lived at the family home in Barnhurst, and was the father of 2 young children with Maria. Their marriage had become deeply unstable. According to evidence later presented at the Old Bailey, Maria had repeatedly been unfaithful. She would leave the family for periods of time, become involved with other men, and then return. Graham continued taking her back. That pattern would become important during sentencing. The judge described him as forgiving of her repeated infidelities and willing to accept her return because he wanted to preserve the family. But by early 2008, the marriage was approaching its end. Divorce was no longer a distant possibility. It was becoming an immediate threat. For Maria, divorce created a practical problem. The family home in Parkside Avenue was worth approximately £170,000. It was the only significant asset available to the couple. If the marriage ended normally, the property could be sold or divided through legal proceedings. Maria wanted the house for herself. Witnesses would later tell the court that she had spoken openly about Graham dying and about what would happen to the property if he were gone. These were not words reported only after the murder by one person with a personal grudge. Prosecutors said she made similar statements to several people. The comments created a clear motive. Graham alive meant negotiations, divorce, and the possibility that Maria would not receive everything she wanted. Graham dead meant she could attempt to claim his estate and remain in the house. But the property was not the only reason the marriage had reached a crisis. Maria was involved with 24-year-old Gary McGinley, a warehouse worker from Welling. She was pregnant with his child. Gary later became central to the investigation, but it is essential to separate the allegations from the final verdict. Maria and Gary were both charged and tried for Graham's murder. Gary was not convicted. The jury cleared him. Maria alone was found guilty. The prosecution's successful case was that Maria wanted Graham dead for the house, for financial gain, and so she could continue her relationship with Gary without the restrictions created by divorce. The defense positions, however, turned the trial into something more complicated. Maria claimed Gary was responsible. Gary told the court that Maria confessed to him. Each person attempted to place the knife in the other's hand. To understand why the jury accepted one account and rejected the other, the timeline of the final night must be reconstructed carefully. On the evening before Graham was discovered, Maria returned to the family home. The marriage was effectively over, but Graham still allowed her access. Prosecutors argued that Maria understood his emotional weakness. He wanted the family restored and remained willing to believe she might return to him. That trust gave her a way into the bedroom. The prosecution said Maria enticed Graham into bed with the promise of sex. The detail explained why he was found naked apart from his socks and why there was no indication that he had prepared for a violent confrontation. He did not believe he was meeting an attacker. He believed his estranged wife was offering intimacy and possibly reconciliation. Once Graham was vulnerable, the attack began. He was stabbed again and again. 31 wounds. The number mattered because it showed that this was not an impulsive single strike during a brief argument. The prosecutor described it as a brutal and sustained attack. And when it ended, Maria did something that would later reveal how quickly she moved from murder to financial benefit. She removed a gold chain from Graham's neck. The chain was blood-stained. Rather than preserving it as part of the scene or leaving it with the husband she claimed she had not killed, Maria took it away. She then contacted Gary McGinley. Gary's account was that Maria called him during the early hours of April 24th and asked him to collect her from outside Graham's address. When he arrived, according to his testimony, Maria told him she had killed Graham so that they could secure their future. The next actions were confirmed through the handling of the chain. Maria and Gary pawned it for £220. The money was then used for a hotel or bed and breakfast stay and shopping. Consider the timing. Graham was lying dead inside the house. His children had lost their father. Maria had taken jewelry from his bloody body. And before the crime had even been discovered, the item was converted into money that helped finance a night with her lover. The prosecution presented this behavior as evidence of motive and consciousness of guilt. It matched the threats witnesses had heard before the killing. Maria had spoken about wanting Graham dead so she could obtain the house. After he was killed, she immediately took something valuable from his body and sold it. This was not the conduct of a shocked wife learning that an unknown attacker had entered the home. It was the conduct of someone moving directly toward the financial and personal future she had already discussed. The following morning, Graham's father, Michael Boyne, went to the house. He found his son in the bedroom. Emergency services were called, but Graham could not be saved. Police secured the scene and began examining the property. The condition of the body immediately narrowed the likely circumstances. Graham was discovered in bed with almost no clothing. There was no reported evidence that he had expected a visitor who posed a threat. A stranger would have needed to gain access, reach the bedroom, and get close enough to launch a prolonged attack. Maria did not need to force entry. She had a relationship with Graham, knowledge of the house, and the ability to make him lower his guard. Investigators also learned that the marriage was ending and that Maria had a direct interest in the property. Then came the affair. Maria was pregnant by Gary. The discovery gave police two possible suspects with an apparent shared interest in Graham's death. If Graham were gone, Maria and Gary could begin a new life together. That theory led detectives to examine whether the killing had been planned by both lovers. Gary's actions after Maria contacted him made him vulnerable to suspicion. He collected her. He was present when the chain was pawned. He benefited from the money used during their time together. And instead of immediately reporting what Maria allegedly told him, he remained with her. The question for investigators was whether Gary had helped plan or carry out the stabbing, or whether he had become involved only after Maria left the house. Maria quickly tried to direct the case toward him. She claimed Gary was the killer. Her position meant that investigators had to examine two competing stories from people who had every reason to lie. The jury would eventually need to decide which account was supported by motive, conduct, and the broader evidence. Prosecutors began with Maria's statements before the murder. Witnesses said she had repeatedly threatened Graham and discussed what she would gain if he died. The language was tied specifically to the house. This distinguished the comments from ordinary anger during a collapsing marriage. Maria was not simply saying she hated Graham. She was connecting his death to ownership of the property. The court heard that she wanted to live there with her new partner. The home became the center of the prosecution's theory. Divorce would place the property into dispute. Murder, Maria believed, could remove the dispute entirely. The second major piece was the condition in which Graham was found. The prosecution argued that Maria used the possibility of sex to make him vulnerable. This theory explained the bedroom setting, the lack of clothing, and the absence of preparation for an attack. It also connected directly to Graham's willingness to forgive her. Someone who had repeatedly taken his wife back might believe that her return to the bedroom signaled another reconciliation. Maria understood that hope. According to the prosecution, she turned it into a weapon. The third major piece was the gold chain. Maria admitted taking it from Graham after he died. There was no innocent explanation for removing jewelry from the neck of a man who had just been stabbed 31 times and then pawning it almost immediately. The chain placed her in direct contact with the body after the murder. It also demonstrated that financial gain was not merely a theory created by police. She physically took an asset from Graham and converted it into cash. The amount, £220, was small compared with the value of the house. But the action revealed the same pattern on a smaller scale. Graham was dead. Maria took what belonged to him. The fourth major piece was Gary's testimony. He told the court that Maria admitted killing Graham. According to Gary, she said the murder was carried out to secure their future. His account matched the prosecution's motive theory, but the jury still had to decide whether he was telling the truth or shifting responsibility away from himself. The fact that he remained with Maria, helped pawn the chain, and spent the money made him an imperfect witness. Prosecutors did not need the jury to believe Gary was morally innocent. They needed the jury to decide whether the evidence proved he participated in the murder. There is an important difference between helping someone after a killing and sharing the intent to kill before it happens. Gary's failure to report Maria and his involvement with the chain could show cowardice, selfishness, or an attempt to protect his lover. But a murder conviction required proof beyond reasonable doubt that he was part of the killing itself. The jury was not convinced. Maria's position was more difficult. She had the prior threats. She had the property motive. She had access to Graham. She had the opportunity to make him vulnerable. She removed the chain. And she attempted to blame the lover whose child she was carrying. As the trial approached, the prosecution portrayed Maria as scheming and devious. Graham was encouraged to believe she might return to him. Gary was encouraged to believe they could build a future together. After Graham's death, Maria tried to use Gary as the explanation for the murder. The same lover who represented her new life also became the person she was prepared to send to prison. This was one of the strongest psychological elements of the case. If Maria and Gary had genuinely formed a united murder plan, they might have maintained a shared story. Instead, the relationship collapsed as soon as police pressure increased. Each began accusing the other. Gary said Maria confessed. Maria said Gary killed Graham. The romance that supposedly justified removing her husband became a courtroom fight for survival. At the Old Bailey, jurors heard how Maria's marriage had deteriorated. They heard about the affairs. They heard that divorce was imminent. They heard that the house was the only major asset. They heard witnesses describe her threats. They learned that she was pregnant by Gary. They heard about Graham's condition when he was found. And they learned what Maria did with the chain. The prosecution described the killing as cold-blooded, brutal, and sustained. Those words reflected the 31 stab wounds, but they also reflected the planning alleged to have taken place before the weapon was used. Maria's motive was not a sudden emotional explosion during an argument. The Crown said she had been speaking about Graham's death in advance. She knew what she wanted. The house. The financial assets. A new life. And freedom from the legal uncertainty of divorce. The defense attempted to create reasonable doubt by pointing toward Gary. He was younger, physically capable, and directly connected to Maria's new relationship. He had collected her after the murder. He had been involved in pawning the chain. Why, the defense could ask, would a completely uninvolved man behave that way? But the prosecution did not portray Gary as admirable. The question was whether his actions proved he stabbed Graham. The jury ultimately decided they did not. Gary McGinley was cleared. That verdict is essential because later summaries of the case have sometimes incorrectly described both lovers as convicted conspirators. The court did not reach that conclusion. Maria Boyne alone was convicted of murder. The jury's decision indicated that it accepted the case against her while retaining reasonable doubt about Gary's role in the killing. Maria's conviction was delivered in March 2009. She was 30 years old. The judge imposed a mandatory life sentence and ordered that she serve a minimum of 24 years before she could be considered for release. During sentencing, the judge focused on Maria's motive and her complete lack of remorse. He said the murder had been committed for gain. He described Graham as the father of her 2 young children and emphasized that he had forgiven her repeated affairs and accepted her back when she chose to return. Maria had used that forgiveness against him. The judge said he detected not one flicker of remorse. That observation was especially powerful because Maria had not only denied killing Graham. She had tried to make Gary carry the blame. A person showing remorse would acknowledge the harm caused. Maria continued protecting herself. The judge also referred to sex and selfishness as motivating factors. The property alone did not explain the entire crime. Maria wanted the house, but she also wanted a life with the man whose child she was carrying. Graham's existence complicated both desires. Divorce could resolve the marriage, but not on Maria's preferred terms. The house might be lost. Money might be divided. Her control over the future would be limited by courts and legal negotiations. Murder appeared to offer a faster answer. Instead, it destroyed every future involved. Graham lost his life. His children lost their father. Maria received a life sentence. Gary, although acquitted of murder, was publicly linked to the case and exposed as the man who helped pawn a dead man's chain rather than reporting the alleged confession immediately. The house that Maria wanted became evidence of motive. The new relationship she hoped to protect collapsed into mutual accusations. And the financial gain she expected was replaced by decades in prison. The power of the prosecution case came from the way Maria's actions before and after the murder aligned. Before Graham died, she spoke about wanting him gone and gaining the house. During the final encounter, she had access to him and could make him lower his guard. After he died, she took his chain, pawned it, and spent the money with her lover. When suspicion closed in, she blamed that lover. Each stage pointed in the same direction. The prior threats established intention. The bedroom circumstances established opportunity. The chain established contact with the body and immediate financial exploitation. The attempt to frame Gary established a reason to believe she was trying to escape responsibility. The number of wounds remains one of the hardest details to process. 31. Graham was more than the victim of 31 stab wounds. He was a working father. He was responsible for 2 children. He had continued trying to hold his family together despite repeated betrayal. The prosecution's case suggested that the very quality that kept him connected to Maria, his willingness to forgive, allowed her to approach him without resistance. She knew he wanted the marriage restored. She knew he might believe a return to intimacy meant another chance. And she knew the layout of the home where he lived. A stranger would have needed force. Maria needed only trust. That is why the condition of the bedroom mattered so much. Graham had not armed himself. He had not prepared to defend the house. He was nearly naked. The person approaching him was someone he believed he knew. The murder transformed an intimate moment into an ambush. She removed the chain. The blood on it connected the object directly to the scene. Pawning it was not an accidental decision made days later under financial pressure. It became part of the immediate aftermath. The money helped pay for accommodation and shopping with Gary. The chain produced £220. The house was worth around £170,000. Maria's thinking, according to the Crown, was the same in both cases. Graham's property became something she believed she could claim once he was no longer alive to resist. Maria had a lover. She was pregnant by him. He collected her after the killing and participated in pawning the chain. Those facts created serious suspicion. But the jury was instructed to apply the criminal standard of proof to each defendant separately. It convicted Maria. It cleared Gary. Maria attempted to use Gary as her escape route. Gary's testimony became evidence against her. The relationship that had helped create the motive became the mechanism through which the case was exposed. By the time sentence was imposed, Maria had lost everything she claimed to be pursuing. She did not gain the free life she imagined. She did not secure a normal future with Gary. She did not walk away from the marriage with the home. Instead, she entered prison under a life sentence with a 24-year minimum term. The judge's remarks returned attention to Graham. He had forgiven her. He had taken her back. He was the father of her children. And in April 2008, while she was pregnant by another man, Maria decided that his continued existence stood between her and the property she wanted. This case did not begin with a mysterious intruder. It began with a marriage already being dismantled by betrayal. It did not end with a perfect murder plan. It ended with a blood-stained chain, two lovers turning on each other, and witnesses remembering the threats Maria had made before Graham died. The house was meant to become the foundation of her new life. Instead, it became the clearest explanation for why the old one was destroyed. Graham Boyne was killed in his own bed by someone who understood exactly how to make him feel safe. Maria believed his death would settle the argument over the future. The jury settled it differently. Gary McGinley walked free after being cleared of murder. Maria Boyne was taken down to the cells to begin a life sentence. And the property she had wanted so badly remained behind as evidence of the motive that put her there. If you found this case as disturbing as we did, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next true crime investigation. We cover every case using court records, official documents, and verified reporting. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next case.